connection to the heart. And certainly we, going into today's Gems from the Wisdom Traditions and the topic of navigating the seas, which we will no doubt looking at analogically, navigating the seas of life as citizens of the future. We were given a quote by Elizabeth Kapu-Vailani Lindsay that true navigation begins in the human heart. And so we're going to have two speakers today. We're so fortunate. And one is going to speak from the nautical tradition of Oceania, and the other will be speaking to us from the tradition of education. And in both cases, I think we're going to find something about that navigation from the human heart. So I'm going to start with Nick Beck. Nick Beck was born and raised here on the islands and doesn't remember a time when he wasn't out on the seas. And he grew up to become a teacher himself and a school principal. He's now retired. He's still very, very involved in the sailing community. He and my husband Cliff here know each other through the holopunis, which are the sailing paddling canoes. So that was in the visual that you got advertising this event. And so Nick, we'd love to hear from you if you'd be so kind.
Okay, thank you. Gosh, it's an honor to be part of such a group. I feel like a lost school kid here. We're talking about navigation. The navigator, Hawaiian is Kelly, to sail, to go from one place to another. I look at navigating, and I've learned about navigating. Really, it's not just going from a place that you are at one point to a place that you can't see. You may see the other place, but you still have to navigate to get there. And a lot of tools have been developed over the years, centuries, for navigation. In ocean travel, of course, yes, we're familiar with the use of the stars.
All right.
And of course, navigation across without any sea in sight by use of the stars. My experiences with the ocean started as when I was 6 months old. My dad had a surfboard made for me and put me on it at Poipu Beach. Unfortunately, that hooked me on the ocean, I think, and the salt water has never gotten out of my veins, and I'm away for too long. I'll have to find a way to get back to the ocean just to get that salt water, the salt smell, and the feel of the ocean in my body. So my dad made it the start for me. I've had in my blood ever since. I've sailed as long as I can remember, through him, through other sailors like Joel Cox, who kept a boat here in Oahu and in Honolulu, Louis Valier, who was at one time a celestial navigation teacher and lectured at the Bishop Museum Planetarium, Earl Shank, who I sailed with on his boat here and in Tahiti, who's no longer with us either. The first canoe that I was in was one my dad brought up when he was a doctor and working in Samoa. We got in it, and he had taken us sailing on his, he had an L16. We sailed on that, but the little canoe turned into a sailing canoe. And he would have old jibs laying around. And one day he asked me, well, I can't find this little jib I was using. And I had to admit that I'd cut it up and found some bamboo and stuck it on the little Samoan sailing canoe we had, and ventured out beyond the reef, sunk it. But we got the sail back, and that was probably my first sailing disaster and failure at navigation through a channel that I should have not gone through. So navigating is finding your way from your location to another location, whether it's seen or unseen. And I've learned from a lot of amazing people. We know how important the stars are, and I was on the Big Island at one point and coming back to Kauai because I knew from looking at weather charts then, we didn't have the high-tech charts we have, but I knew there was a big west-northwest swell coming. This would have been in the late 70s, and my son was up at HBA, and I wanted to get back to Kauai because I knew there was going to be a huge swell coming. But Wally Forsyth called me and some others, and they said, look, you sailed with us in the past as we were developing the canoe. You got to be here because Maupialog is coming from Micronesia. And I thought, well, okay, I've got to go. And it was a divine appointment. We got out to Kualoa, where the Hokulea was at that time, and it was a hot, glassy day. There was no wind at all, just a slick ocean. And we went out to sea, and Mao didn't say much. He didn't speak a lot of really good English there, but he was whittling away at a little piece of wood that later turned into a watertight box with a lid on it that he kept his tobacco in. And he was chopping away at that. And people were asking him questions, and he would answer some and then just kind of look around and sail. And I asked him, I sat down by him, didn't say anything until I just had to say, Mao, there's no wind now. The cloud is covering the sky where the sun should be. It's glassy. How do you know where we're going? What to do? And he said, feel this. And he goes, now. And it makes me cry a bit, I'm sorry. And he says, this is your predominant swell coming from where your trade winds are. Now, we're in the northern Pacific, way away from his home. It's the first time he's out there. And he picks up what was left over from our trade wind swell. He says, that's your northeast predominant swell. That's where you can navigate by that. And then he says, but you can be fooled because there's another swell. It's bigger. It's not coming as frequent, but it's a bigger swell. That's a ocean storm swell coming from someplace else. And he points to the west. And I'm sitting here knowing that this thing is coming in, wanting to be at home because I knew it was going to come to Honolulu. He had no weather charts. He had nothing but sitting on the deck of a canoe, and he felt this other wave coming. He says, you would be fooled by this. You have to know where your true swell is coming from. And then you have to pick up that pattern because it's going to come and it will go from the west. And I thought at that point, I want to learn what this man has to say. And I've used that again later in the future, years after I first met him. So my love affair with canoes began early. I started putting on sails, and I worked with a lot of canoes that became racing canoes. But I wanted to make my own personal canoe that I would dream of sailing all the Hawaiian Islands in. I built a canoe, didn't have a name for it, and I went to a Hawaiian lady who was really a mentor of ours, and asked her, told her what I was doing, and I wanted a name for my canoe, and I told her what I was going to do. My dream was to sail all the Hawaiian Islands. And she put her head down and she looks up and she says, Holopuni. And I didn't know. I said, Holopuni, what Holopuni? She says, Holopuni, you will sail everywhere. Holopuni is to sail everywhere. And I go, well, that's what I want to do. She says, no, no, no. You will go further than your dream. And my dream was then to sail the Hawaiian Islands. Well, since then, we've had Holopuni sailing throughout all of Polynesia, first from Tahiti, throughout the Tahiti, throughout now the entire Tuamotu chain, um, in Fiji, in Australia, in New Zealand, in New Hebrides, New Caledonia, Australia, the Indian Ocean now, and we even have one sailing and navigating in England. So we've navigated a lot of places. One of the things I learned, besides learning to follow certain stars, was that you had to be consciously aware all the time of where you were wanting to go. You had to have that in your mind. An example of that was one year I was in Tahiti, and rather foolhardily, without a lot of great deal of preparation, we sailed without any navigational aids, no compass, flashlights didn't work. We took off we thought it was going to be a piece of cake. We were only going from the island of Moorea to Huahine. Can't see Huahine, it's 100-something miles away. But we thought, yeah, a piece of cake on a glassy night like this with a full moon. Well, about an hour after we left Moorea, it got cloudy. And then it got cloudier. And then it started raining. And the seas picked up. And the swell started changing. And they were breaking over the canoe. And we were not prepared. And we sailed, I would say, by the seat of our pants. And again, picking a direction of what had been a predominant swell direction, what Mao had been talking about. We sailed all night. And I honestly thought at some points, I was going in circles. Morning came, there was still no sight of land. It was cloudy and dark, but ahead of us, as it did get lighter, we saw a bank of clouds across the entire horizon. And I thought, oh, well, there's got to be something out there but it's stretched out from as far to my right and as far to my left, or port or starboard, as I could see. But as we sailed on, as the clouds moved, there was one stack of clouds that sort of stayed just off my port bow. And I thought, well, that could be land. I've learned that clouds will stack up over mountains, and Huahine has some big mountains. I didn't know where I was, and I just hoped that was right. And we sailed, and it got a little bit lighter, and all of a sudden we looked, and there was land, and we got in. It's a lesson not to sail without a full kit of navigational aids, but we did, and just using what by feel and some knowledge that we had, we made it. Another time we were sailing in Tahiti, and I was amazed as we were going to Bora Bora. It was again a cloudy day, overcast, and just like a kind of a fog was in there. But as we went, I could look in the sky, and the bottom of the sky, the clouds were lit up a light, beautiful blue. And we followed that, and we got closer, and we saw the Bora Bora. The blue was the reflection of the lagoon on the bottom of the clouds, just over Bora Bora. So that was pretty amazing. Then again, I sailed my Holopuni. Our longest sail when we first did it was from Oahu to Kauai. We did it on June 11th, Kamehameha Day in 1981 or 2 or something. And I wanted to sail it without any navigation. I wanted to do celestial navigation on that and just use the stars. Again, I turned to Louis Valier, who was lecturing at the Bishop Museum Planetarium. He said, okay, let's go over there. And he set up a star chart for us, set up the planetarium for June 11th, the day we were going to go, from sunset to sunrise. And as the stars changed, he pointed out the stars in the sky that I would have to use as my my compass points, my chart. And so I had to learn those, and I thought I had them pretty down. We got to Pokai Bay, loaded up. We did have an escort boat, but I said, I want you to follow us and not ever get in front of us or alongside of us. You know, I don't want to use that as any navigational assistance. We got off in a point, and again, the storm came in. And I mean, this was, as the North Shore can get, really ugly. Waves were breaking over us, flying fish where we had these calamine lights up on our boom, and the fish were flying and hitting the canoe. We had to turn those off, so we didn't have any light at all. And all I had was, okay, this is where the wind and the waves were coming from. This is a different storm. It's coming straight from the north, and I don't want to go straight north or I'll be way above Kauai. And so I picked a swell pattern, and I knew the waves would be changing as we got away from the island, off of the Kaina Point and into the mid-channel, and then again changing as we would hopefully be getting to Kauai. Again, no light, no full moon, no moon at all. Next morning, again, I thought, you know, I've blown it, you know, guys. We could be heading for Alaska or Samoa or Japan. You know, I thought I'd done this right, but you know, we're going to stick on this and see what happens. And all of a sudden, my son, who was in the front of our little Holopuni, stands up and he goes, "Dad, it's there, it's there!" And sure enough, there Kauai was. We stayed on that course and made it right into Honolulu Harbor, kind of mid-morning. Took us 16 and a half hours for that paddled sail. But we did it, and once again, I attribute making it just to intuition, into what I had learned from others. Trust yourself, trust your instincts, and trust what you learn, because you've learned from some amazing people. So that's kind of my story. A lot of other stories about getting lost at sea. But I people ask me about navigation, and I, without joking, I tell them, you know, the greatest navigational aid I've ever followed or used was a big yellow catamaran who was out in front of us as we crossed from Hawaii back to Kauai. And it was always there. Well, no, sometimes it wasn't. They would disappear, and we find out later they'd gone off, forgetting us, but they were catching dinner someplace, and our navigational aid was gone. But they would show up again and be out in front of us, and that was great. So thank you, Cliff, at navigational aid. It was great. But yeah, we navigate through life, and there's ups and downs, and sometimes we're going to get lost. The greatest navigators have been lost. They've been sunk. They haven't always made it to the right place. but the really great ones they have. And I'm certainly not one of those, but do my best to follow in their footsteps. So thank you, Renee. I don't have much more to say, but aloha.
Thank you. That was really, really captivating. And I've never heard a description of how wayfinding really works in terms of that following of the waves. And I've heard about reflecting pieces of land in the clouds. I've never heard of lagoons being reflected. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. We're going to hear from Matthew Hawkins. When I met Matthew, he was helping us out in opening Still and Moving Center. He called himself a recovering attorney. And I don't know whether he considers himself fully recovered, but he is certainly doing a lot to help other people younger than himself recover their sense of direction and purpose. He works now at Olamana School, which is a place where a lot of at-risk youth are being educated, and he sees them coming in and out of the school and returning again. It's a place I get the sense that one can be encountering a lot of people who feel lost, and maybe it's even tempting to feel lost oneself in terms of not knowing how to help these youngsters. And so we're really happy to be able to hear from him. I think one of the ways that he keeps the remarkable equanimity that I've always seen in him is he's a meditator. He guides others in Buddhist meditations. And so I'm going to let you go there. Matthew, what can you tell us?
Okay, thank you for the kind words. And really a pleasure to be here with all of you. And Nick, your words got me really excited. I started going back to childhood memories of being on my dad's boat. I want to talk about that. I got all this other questions to ask you, but that's okay. We'll do it another time. So yeah, well, I'll just share a bit about myself because, you know, it's always interesting to know someone's background. I was born in New York, but I grew up in Hawaii and San Francisco, and both my parents were psychologists. And they came to Hawaii and they started a commune. It was kind of like psychology, art, you know, I guess you could say. And so those were very formative, interesting years here in Oahu. And then we moved to Ka'u in South Kona. And then we were in Kealakekua for a while before eventually going over to San Francisco. And my interests in life, you know, thinking about today and the education perspective, they were always revolved language at an early age. You know, I was surrounded by people speaking in different ways and, you know, loving as a kid being in Hawaii and the pidgin, and then, you know, as a kid being in the schools in San Francisco and hearing, you know, immigrants from Vietnam and from Mexico, and, you know, how the black kids would talk, and, you know, it was just very rich. So I was always very tuned into that. So I wound up doing French, Spanish, and linguistics in college, and then I kicked around for a while. I lived in France. I taught English in South Korea, and I wound up going to law school and had a very good time. It was a great education. I worked for a judge. That was very interesting. And I think I probably would have stayed with it if I'd stayed more in my interest area, which was immigration. I was doing immigration law, and which was fascinating, working on asylum cases, helping people from other countries who were fleeing political persecution, stuff like that. And but I wasn't. I was working in more of a corporate atmosphere that was very kind of, high pressure. And so eventually I decided to take a pause from that. And around 15 years ago, my stepmom had moved back here, uh, and she was ill with cancer. So I came and took care of her. And then I just decided to stay. And I went, you know, did a lot of exploration, went back to school, got my teaching certificate, and lo and behold, I'm at Olamana School, which, as Renee pointed out, is a school that kind of focuses on helping people find their way. So there's 3 different campuses. Some of you may have heard of it. There's the incarcerated facility, for youth serving time for crimes. And so the teachers go in and deliver instruction to them in the modules. There's the day school, which is for at-risk youth. And, they come to school and then they go home or wherever they're staying, aunties or, a friend's. And then there's also the detention home in Kapolei, where juveniles are held pending sentencing. So it's a shorter time frame, but they're being instructed out there. And so this is a broad topic. You could come at it a lot of different ways. I guess some of the which is good and hard, philosophically, navigation from an education standpoint. And I guess the other area that grabs me is spiritual as well. Partly because there's been much of my own journey, but I also see it in the kids that I work with. And so what do I see in the classroom? One of them is just fear. These are kids trying to find their way through life, and they are uncertain. Many of them are not supported, and they're afraid of making mistakes. I teach mostly English, and for many students, that's not their favorite topic, that or math. And so I find that I'm trying to help them navigate. Like I'm teaching English, but I'm trying to help them navigate through life as well. Just give them some advice. And so one of the things I tell them all the time is, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Just that's okay. It's okay to not know the answer. It's okay to make a mistake. You're not going to get called out in this class for that. And so that does help some. And the other thing that comes to mind is when we're younger, just generally, this is kind of a truism that has its place. We're on a quest to acquire knowledge to help us understand the external world, which helps us feel more confident in our ability to interact with the world and to, we have a better sense that we have agency and we know how to survive. We know the rules of the world. So there's a lot of focus on trying to accumulate external knowledge when we're younger, just to help us get by. And then as the years go by, sometimes we realize as we get older that the external world is important, but we see that our own mentality or mindset about the world, affects the quality of our experience with the world. So then, sometimes there's a shift in that direction as well, navigating the inner space as opposed to the outer space, trying to find a truer direction within ourselves, perhaps, might be a way of putting it. I have a favorite auntie who lives on the Big Island. She's turning 90 this year. And she's a really lovely lady who's just, been an adventurer and an explorer her whole life. And one of the actually sailing metaphors that she gave me this was maybe a year or so ago. I was going through some changes, and she talked about tacking for center, sailing, tacking for center. I said, "Oh, well, what is that about?" And she said, "We're always trying to find our way in the world. And so, we might go zig this way for a while, and then eventually we discover the limits of that knowledge, more in a, I guess, knowledge seeking or a self knowledge seeking sense. We take one direction, we explore a certain philosophy, a certain school of thought, and then we realize, well, that's helpful, but I need to get more of this. And then we tack over in the other side and we start pursuing the other angle. And how life is much of that, where it's a back and forth to go forward and to come to a truer center, and if we're sailing, that's what we're trying to do, right? Get to our destination. Another thing that came to mind with navigation is the relative world and the absolute world. So several years ago, as I started a meditation practice, this was sometime after my stepmom had died, I was a little frustrated, and I talked with one of the meditation teachers because I said, "Listen, all this Buddhism is great stuff, but it's really hard to practice in the real world. We got life going on around us all the time." I said, there's no self. Great, okay, universal truths. And the teacher talked about how, yes, these are very important things to learn. They give us some sense of space from ourselves, an ability to quiet our own mind, to think about our place in the universe, our smallness, our absence of self, or whatever it is within the absolute truths that brings us some release. But then they said, yes, but after the retreat is over, it's right. You're correct. You got to go back out into the real world, and you got to operate in that world. So really the practice of being a human being is being able to do both, to live in the world where birthdays matter. And if you don't, someone's feelings might be hurt. Or yes, bills do need to be paid and paid on time, or consequences, etc., etc. Taking care of the body, exercising, feeding, shopping. And so she said, the trick is to find the easiest transition between both worlds. Make that transition just easy on yourself and make it a practice. So that was something I always appreciated. What else? Oh, again, from the big picture, navigating more as a just philosophical thing. We can always pose the question, who is the navigator, right? We go through life. Sometimes we come to these phases in life where we're sort of adrift for a while, or we don't know where we're going or what we're doing. So we can ask this rhetorical question. Well, of course, we are the navigator. So where is it that we want to go? What is blocking us? Am I able to see what is blocking me, or do I need help in order to see clearly? A lot of times we have imprints on us from childhood or growing up that obscure our vision. So maybe we need the counsel of friends to see clearly, or maybe we need a spiritual practice, or maybe we need therapy, or maybe we need to be working in a different job, So asking those questions and trying to get our perception as clear as possible, our ability to see clearly, so that we can navigate, our navigation will be effective, right? Because if we can't see clearly, then we can navigate all we want, but we could really be kind of going in misguided directions, or not really knowing where we're going, or not understanding why we're going. And what is that? What else? I guess the last piece, and it's kind of related to that, is just surrounding ourselves with supportive people and conditions. Um, Life is one large journey composed of many smaller journeys. So, just thinking about the destination that we're currently charting for, what project are we undertaking in our life? What equipment do we need? If we're doing a certain kind of sailing venture, if we're sailing canoes, va'a, we may need certain ropes or certain, whatever, tools, pitch, turpentine. What experts would help us? Do we need somebody who's has industry expertise? Do we need somebody who's, good at reading stars? Or is our the destination we're currently charting for something completely different? Maybe we're building a school in Indonesia, and we need builders, we need financial people, we need medical folks, we need people to interface with the local government who know the rules and regulations. So I guess that, yeah, surrounding ourselves with the support that we need, the people, the conditions, and to help our navigation be smoother, and remembering that it's always going to change, to be open to that as well. So I think that's the essence of what I have. Oh, one last thing, I guess. Two last things. One is, I was thinking about this from the big picture too. Untethered navigation versus intentional navigation. So if we're piloting an aircraft or sailing a ship, we want to be very intentional. It's necessary for our safety and to get where we want to go. And so there's a lot of focus and skills that come with that. Then thinking about untethered navigation, for example, if you were traveling in Europe and you had a pass, like a Eurail pass that allowed you to go to any country you wanted to, and you could just jump on a train and say, what do I feel like today? Oh, look, there's a train going to Rome. Let's go to Rome. Let's see what it's about. And just kind of following the journey and allowing it to reveal and unveil itself, and to receive it, whatever it is, and to make a new change after several days in Rome. So something, I'm not sure how that applies in a broader sense, but I think there's something there. And the last piece is kind of identified with something that you said, Nick, which was about getting lost. And when I was 12 years old, I went to, my parents were divorced when I was young, and I went to visit my mom in New York City. It was the first time I'd seen her since I was maybe 5. And I was kind of scared to go on my own. My dad put me on the plane, and I said, Dad, what if I get lost? That's a really big city. And he said, don't worry, you'll find your way. He said, just ask people. He said, as a matter of fact, get lost. Go walk the streets. And so I was kind of scared, but I took his advice. I got there, and I liked playing video games at the time. And so I went to find a video arcade, and I promptly got lost somewhere in, 42nd Street. And then I just started asking people, how do I get back to Union Square? And they were like, oh, well, you're going to walk a couple blocks this way, and you're going to go down, and there's a subway. And so that was a really helpful lesson. And I'll close with that. Thank you.
So lovely. Something about you, what you said, actually many pieces of it reminded me of the hero's journey. that Joseph Campbell brings up, and how important it is to notice and the companions, for example, that join you along the way, and what kind of help they can provide, and what equipment they may provide, and what guidance they may provide, and that I think the hero doesn't always know exactly where he's going, or if he or she know where they're going, they don't necessarily know how to get there. And so that it does take a certain heroism, a certain amount of courage to step into the unknown like that. And we're never going to get anywhere unless we're willing to do that, to leave the confines of what we know, to discover anything new. So thank you for your examples as well as this heroic journey. And I imagine there are so many times when you're with those kids and you just don't exactly know what to do. And then we hear Nick's advice to really trust in what you've learned, trust in your teachers, trust in yourself and your natural self-guidance system. And all of a sudden, you probably find yourself saying things to them that, as your ear listens to what your mouth is saying, you go, oh, I didn't know I knew that. That was a really good piece of advice. Am I right? Do you have that happening sometimes?
It's true. Yeah. And I find it takes me a while to get to know each kid and what makes them tick, you know. Some are quiet and reserved, some are loud but really scared inside. So trying to find the right approach with each one, you know. Yeah.
Tracking to find center, tacking for center,
Exactly.
tacking for
Yeah.
center. Yeah. Wonderful. Beth, I see your hand up.
Yeah, well, a question that came to my mind, especially Nick hearing about the great Polynesian navigator Mao, who knew the ancient way of navigating from all these different signs in nature as well as the stars and stuff. Sometimes you hear about like navigating by intuition, but the story you told, Nick, about him being able to decipher two different wave patterns, it almost makes me think that what we often think of as intuition is more like intimacy. Like it seems like Mao had an intimate connection with all these different aspects of nature. As well, I know you and your Holopuni, you have an intimate connection with your craft. You know every little bit of it. You know all the ropes and all the yakus and the amas and so forth. But it seems like there's an intimacy that is formed between the sailor, the ship, and the sea that allows for one to navigate in a way that you don't maybe you're kind of lost, but if you're able to follow these deeper signs both in life and on the ocean, you can get where you need, you get back to safety, or you get where you have to go, which you've often pulled off, Nick.
I just learned this from my own experience over the years. Is when you go out, whether you're going to some place, navigating to some place that's unseen, or to a place that you know how to get to. Um, Never go out without expecting the unexpected. And too often the unexpected uh, comes into play, whether it's meeting amazing friends or having a mishap. Um, it's there. And keep that in the back of your mind. Oh, okay, now I got to deal with this. My navigation is to deal with the unexpected. And it's not such a shock, and it helps us to get through that. And another thing, Matt, I really appreciate what you talked about in education and everything. And gosh, I remember having teachers come to me and talk about, they got a class full of dummies and, troublemakers. And, Honolulu was the Wild West when I, first started coming out here to be a teacher in this. And I sat down, I would go to these classes and I'd look around, and I came to the conclusion, and I shared it with the teachers. I said, I'll bet you anything. There are a few kids in this class that have more brains than you and me put together. They're not dummies. We just, in the learning disabled program, I came to believe, and I came to share, it's not the kids who are learning disabled, it's us. We are teaching disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Learn to teach what they're able to want to learn. It will all come easy. And that's sort of what you were pulling off and working with your kids. I really, we'll talk boat stories sometime, but we'll get back to the navigation of ourselves and those we work with too. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I keep coming back to that one myself. We had a trauma expert a couple years ago. His name was Dr. Eric Jensen. He was a marvelous gentleman, presenting us, with the latest research on working with traumatized youth. And but the conclusion that many of us came out of that with was it really has to do with how well we work together. That's what's going to make the difference. If we're working well together, the students are going to see that, and they're going to feed off that, and they're going to know we have their best interests at heart. So therein lies a lot of the daily work, trying to work better with colleagues, and like you said, provide opportunities for all their many different brilliances to shine that cannot within the confines of a regimented system.
Elizabeth, I see your hand up, and Elizabeth is a lifelong educator herself. Not sure that's what she's speaking from, but she's also a world traveler.
I had to get rid of that cosmic background and honor the seas with a photo I took myself on a New Zealand beach, and that's on the cover of my Gaia's dance book. Anyway, Nick and Matthew, thank you so much for so much experience and wisdom. I was hanging on both your every words, and yes, Cliff, to intimacy with nature. I've been in love with sailing canoes for at least 40 years and tracking things, and once said to Nainoa Thompson, thank you for your contribution to human evolution. And he looked at me and said, what on earth do you mean? Right? But it was. And Nick, your comment that when navigating, you have to always be consciously aware of where you want to go. I took that one very seriously, because what I learned from Polynesian navigators that I spoke to myself over the years was one wonderful session where they showed me that when all else fails in reading the signs of nature, raise your consciousness high enough to see your destination. And I translated that into what I call standing tall in your canoe in my talks about navigating our perfect storm of crises on the planet, because my job is tracking human evolution from evolution biology into futurism. So I I tell people, you know, when you feel like you're at the bottom of a dark well and there's nowhere to go and it's all hopeless, raise yourself up out of that well and so high up that you can see this human drama as though it's a stage play under you. And then look at where the currents and eddies are going and where there are people of like mind with you and something that your heart sings to that you can do with other people toward a better future, no matter whether you're a bread baker or a musician or a politician or whatever. There's always something that you can do in a positive way toward the future. And I found that so helpful. And then the flexibility of the canoes, the fact that they were lashed together so that they could move with the waves and not break. That flexibility also was something that you, Matthew, spoke about in navigating through life. And another metaphor that I have loved is, it came to me when I used to be jealous that other people had spirit guides telling them what to do and where to go. And then I read that Socrates, just before he was put to death, was asked by a student, Master, how did you follow the path of life so straight, so truly all your life? How did you see that destination and follow that good path? And Socrates said, I never saw my destination, but I could always tell when I was off my path. And then I could get back onto it. And that reminded me of the sea turtle who has that inner compass. So I use that metaphor of the sea turtle that knows when it's off its track and can regain the path. And I think that's a very helpful thing to do with kids, to have them cultivate that inner compass. So thank you so much for this rich session today.
We did get a little bit of a late start, and we have the benefit of having two wonderful speakers. I want to give us enough time for everybody who's with us to give a comment or a question or a takeaway.
Aloha. Thank you so much, both you, Nick and Matthew. When I'm listening to this talk, have either of you ever been to Satawal? Do you know how tiny it is? My husband, my son, and my daughter lived in Yap for 4 years. I was able to travel to Yap, to Satawal on not on a canoe. I give you so much credit. That terrifies me. But where Mao is from, there's no communication. Well, during that time, there was no communication. They had satellite phones. And as with indigenous peoples everywhere, you didn't talk. You didn't ask questions. God gave you 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth. You're supposed to look, listen, and quiet. And this is how all of the indigenous teachers worked. And Mao was, very reticent. He did not talk a lot. He was one of those who, when you're on a tiny area, all you have to do is look at the ocean, look at the trees, look at the sky, whatever birds are around, whatever animals in the sea, you watch them. And from that is how you learn. And I was very fortunate to be around those people. And at one point, my husband says, we're back in Honolulu, and Mao was here with other elders from the different islands in Yap. And he says, Mao needs to go to Nainoa's compound in New Valley. He says, take him. So all these guys jumped in the back of our truck, and I don't know where I'm going, but that's okay. I had the navigators in the back, and I'm taking them to where they needed to go. So it's in our current time, everybody's on their cell phones. Everybody is got information right there. But if you take all that away, they don't know anything. So it's I feel kind of I've observed both, and I just want to close my mouth, open my eyes, and listen. Thank you.
Amen, Mary. Robert, you spend a lot of time on the sea.
Yeah, but not too much on the open ocean, just a bit. But I'm kind of with Mary. I mean, to me, talk about uncertain. I mean, you never know what my experience with being in the open ocean. There's too many surprises. So to be to sail in a stormy sea to me is like, well, that's like being God in my particular estimation. But so most of my experience is just by the coast surfing. But my question is kind of connected with Mary's comment about currents. Nick mentioned being able to sense currents and what direction they were coming from. And then, of course, Matthew talked about the inner world, inner dynamics, and how they interact in interpersonal relationship. So this is what I'm thinking about is, seems like an important sensitivity to develop. And I wondered if you had any comments about developing that sensitivity for both physical and psychic current.
Developing physical and psychic sensitivity, that was the question?
Yeah, so that you can interact appropriately, right? And you can stay in the right direction.
Yeah. Good question. I can only speak from my experience, which has been that it's an ongoing practice of trying to find different things that just trying out a lot of different things, exploring a lot of different practices. For me, I'll sort of focus it on, because I relate to it best from my experience. So for myself, have had struggled with some chronic pain, some health issues for years, and so I had to and I was going to see doctors quite a lot to find out what was going on. And, they would run tests and they'd tell me, oh, the serum and blah, 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 medical terminology is this, that, and deviate, but there was no real conclusion. So what I discovered for myself was that I needed to get to know my body really well. And so thus began, working with somebody at the gym. It started with a personal trainer, and then it went to, working with a Ralpher. And then the Ralpher sent me to Renee's dance class. And I said, but I don't dance. I can't do that. But, I realized I needed to explore it. So I got over my resistance, and which was a wonderful thing to do. It's brought me here today. And so many other disciplines, the yoga, the meditation. So I don't know, that's how I would come at it, but I'm sure Nick also might have some thoughts on it.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Gosh, where was I would say again with Betty, it's hard to teach something like that. It's experiences come to you and to take those in and to learn from them and to use them and to be open to other people who can shed some light on what you're going through, um, and be open to that. Same thing with Matt. I'm going through 3.5 years of 24/7 9 out of 10 pain from a shingles attack I had. It left me with, I guess they call it post-traumatic neuralgia. It's burning, burning, burning. And I've gone all over the country seeking medical help. I've tried every known ointment and legal and illegal drug, but now I'm really having to focus on just myself learning to relax and live with it. And it's been hard. You're seeking an answer and seeking relief and, trying everything and seeking out inputs. But I think a lot of it comes down to, what you can really focus on doing for yourself within yourself, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah. But by the way, have you tried homeopathic treatments?
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. I'm open for anything, so you can email me or.
No. It requires a good. The trouble is, that homeopathy is definitely an art, and you have to have a good therapist.
Yeah.
I've had a couple in my life, but they're all gone.
Yeah.
But it's worthless unless you've got somebody that knows the art.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you've tried it because supposedly you can treat it.
Yeah.
Let's see if we have a word from David or Carolyn. Want to make sure we get an opportunity for everybody who might want to share. So many life navigators here in this group today.
Well, my question, which Nick to some extent addressed with the uncertainty and feeling of perhaps being off course. And that's the outright danger. One of the times I used to race on the Atlantic Ocean, and one of the times a competitor hit me and the boat began to fill up with water, and we were definitely in danger of sinking about 3 miles off coast. And there was a boat that could come over and throw us a line and tow us back. But it is possible that you can get into circumstances that are deadly, that you could lose the if you want to call it the competition with nature. And so I'm wondering if anything in your experience, and that's true perhaps when you're counseling teenagers or all, because you could lose one who just kind of gave up. So I'm wondering if you had to learn the lesson of confronting the possible losing control over circumstances and actually face death. And what would that do to your enterprise, to your understanding of traveling and the ocean? And you spoke about the waves, and they can be big. There's no doubt. So I guess I'm kind of curious as to how you've gone through the possibility that you are going to lose this encounter with nature. Or maybe you never had that because you were always on top of the situation.
You want me to try and answer that from my standpoint?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to walk into another room. I've got a navigational tool that I go by, but Yes. Have I had that experience? Absolutely. There are a number of occasions that I've gone out and I had no business coming back to land. It was all over. It was going to be all over, and I didn't accept that though. And was I afraid? At times I was, but I have a tool that I know where I'm going, and here's my tool. I know where I'm going. I'm headed for the cross, and I'm going to be with Jesus. And I've never set foot on the ocean without having a prayer first that the Lord be with us, guide us, protect us. And it's gotten us through. So that's the faith that I have wherever I'm navigating to. And sometimes I don't really know where I'm navigating to. Amen. That's all I can share on that.
Thank you so much. I might look or sound differently for somebody else, but when one has an internal guidance system like that, it's pretty powerful. And I think it does have the ability to indeed face the possibility of death and know that's not the worst thing that could possibly happen. But losing that internal guidance system would be a lot worse. Last call.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, good. I don't know if my video's on. I'm using the phone and it's a little confusing, but what a great talk. I love the way it weaved together a couple different topics. And I just was thinking about what Cliff said about intuition. And it made me think of a little rhyme, birds do it, bees do it. And I was thinking even, butterflies do it. You think about how with their tiny little brains, they have navigation systems built in that lead them through generations of finding their way around the planet and always end up in the same spot, right place, right time. So I think we have these systems built in if we can open ourselves to them. I think we are powerful beyond measure if we allow ourselves the opportunity, as Mary pointed out, to listen, to open ourselves to the messages that the divine has left for us everywhere. So thank you both. Nick, you look so much like my Uncle Bud, who I traveled starting off in Bora Bora through Tahiti and through the Tuamotus and Marquesas, and then my first landing in Hawaii was on that boat, Aolo, or the Greek name for the god of the sea. And I remember my Uncle Bud would do sun sightings, and that's how we navigated, with his sextant, taking a view of the sunset each evening, and that was the only navigation we had to work with, and we made it just in time. So I really appreciated the talk, and I'm looking forward to working with kids and giving them the opportunity, I think, to have a true north, through the wisdom that we as elders can provide. And it comes, I think it begins, and this was somewhere in the conversation, with that connection of actually having an authentic connection with these kids that are troubled and at risk. That building that connection is where it all begins. So thank you everyone so much for the talk. I really appreciated it.
Yes, it was really a lovely, lovely session, you guys. Just so heartfelt and really so in tune with one another in so many ways, in ways that touched all of the rest of us who are really, I think, not just honored to be able to hear you, but inspired. There's so much courage behind what each of you have done with your lives. And that willingness to face the unknown and still step forward and still try no matter what. It's truly inspiring. Thank you both so much. I want to tell everybody briefly about next week's topic, which will be in honor of Mahatma Gandhi's birthday, which will be on October 2nd. Gandhi considered himself a soldier, though a soldier of peace. And so in this year of becoming citizens of the future, we're considering this topic of soldiers of peace. And to do so, we have a man who works for a Gandhian nonprofit that operates in northern India in the Rajasthan desert. Their province is over, I can't remember whether it's 1 or 3 million people that their nonprofit helps to care for. And it's just this really active nonviolence, that it's not a passive state, it's something active that they're doing on behalf of the whole. He's faced, no doubt, lots and lots of obstacles to navigate through, and he's always done so as a soldier of peace. So his name is Prakash Tyagi. He's spoken for us 2 or 3 times in the past, and it's really a treat. I put into your chat box a way to listen to or watch the TED Talk that was given by the woman who whose quotes you got in your email. Elizabeth Kapu Ubailani Lindsay. Okay, aloha.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.